Hello everyone! Thank you for visiting our channel. Have you ever experienced such like stories? Sarah, despite her 45 years, could boast a splendid figure and a cascade of auburn hair. She had 2 children, her eldest daughter Madeline, who had been living independently for a long time, and her son Joseph, a third-year college student. With her husband Michael, they had been together for many years, and the passion in their marriage had subsided, giving way to mutual respect, attachment, and love. Michael was 2 years older than his wife and had his own bakery network in the region. They built the business together with Sarah, who always stood by her husband's side and helped him make decisions, for which he was now grateful. Perhaps without her, he would never have been able to achieve such heights. Currently, they had everything they could wish for. Sarah never experienced any refusal from her husband. He indulged her, allowing her to spend money on whatever she wanted. Sarah did not work. She tried several times to build her own business separately from her husband, but quickly gave up and realized that she preferred to be simply a wife and a mother. Once, Sarah was in the kitchen when she heard the apartment door open. In the hallway appeared Joseph and his friend James. "What handsome boys came to our house." She greeted them with a smile. "Mom." Joseph was embarrassed. The boys went to the room to play video games with her son. Later, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah saw James putting on his shoes. "Are you leaving already? Why isn't Joseph seeing you off?" "Well," Samantha called him. "They are sitting there cooing like lovebirds." James laughed. "Well, let me see you off." The woman smiled. After getting dressed, the guy was about to leave, but as soon as he opened the door, he turned around and told Sarah that she looked great. She didn't have time to say anything in response before James disappeared behind the door. A woman was pleased by a compliment from a young man. She immediately felt several years younger and more attractive. In the evening, her husband also noticed her uplifted mood and asked what had happened. Sarah told Michael everything that had happened without thinking, and he frowned and asked her not to invite their son's friends over anymore. Was he jealous? Sarah asked in surprise. Michael nodded, and the conversation was closed. This made Sarah even more pleased. It meant that there was still some spark left in their marriage, and she could make men look at her with desire, even her husband, despite their long years of marriage. After Sarah told her husband about James's words, he started calling her more often during the day, asking how things were and whether they had any guests. At first, Sarah was flattered by Michael's behavior, but later it began to irritate her, and they had a big fight because of his desire to control her. "Are you having a midlife crisis or something?" she shouted at him in the heat of the argument. "No, I'm just trying to protect my wife from sin," Michael retorted. Sarah was offended by him. She thought that her husband didn't trust her, but the thought of being close to James lingered in her head. "Why isn't James coming over?" she said once, inadvertently to her son. "Did you guys have a fight?" Joseph asked, chewing on a sandwich. "No, he's working," Sarah replied. "He's also in love with some girl," Joseph added. After hearing this, Sarah was a little upset. For some reason, she wanted to stomp her foot like little girls do and pout from the offense. She had honestly believed that James liked her, but perhaps it was just her husband's jealousy that had spun these thoughts in her head. One day, when Joseph was at school and Michael was at work, the doorbell rang in their apartment. Upon approaching the door and looking through the peephole, Sarah was surprised to see James there. "What are you doing here?" she asked, opening the door. In response, he handed her a bouquet of flowers. "I won't take it, you keep it." She pushed away James's hand and was about to close the door, but the guy managed to put his foot in and pulled the door towards himself with his free hand. Sarah was shocked by such audacity. How dare this young man behave like this? She was angry with him and even wanted to push him in the shoulder, but didn't have a chance. James kissed her. He leaned in, and his hands were already exploring under her shirt. Later, lying with James on the couch and trying to catch her breath after being intimate with him, she wondered how to tell him to forget everything. Maybe she could pay him off, threaten him that she knows the dean of their university and could influence his expulsion. Thoughts whirled in her head. At that moment, James turned to her and stroked her cheek. The touch was so gentle and careful that Sarah involuntarily leaned towards the young man. "You are so beautiful," he whispered in her ear. Inside, Sarah was overwhelmed with pleasure, and she purred like a cat. Seeing James off, she asked him not to come again. He nodded in agreement. The bouquet lay on the dresser near the entrance until evening, and before her husband's arrival, Sarah threw it into the trash chute. James didn't keep his promise, and a week later was standing at Sarah's doorstep again. Their meetings continued for several months. They had become so relaxed that they stopped controlling everything, and one day they slipped up. In the morning, Sarah saw off her family members and rushed to take a quick shower and get ready for her lover's arrival. After the doorbell rang, she happily skipped out of the shower humming a tune from a movie. James, seeing her in just a towel, became aroused and dragged her to bed. They were so caught up in the moment that they didn't hear Michael come home, having forgotten his documents. Upon opening the front door, he immediately realized that his wife wasn't alone. Barely stepping inside, he heard moans and familiar sounds echoing throughout the empty apartment. At first, he thought his wife was watching some interesting videos, but then he noticed a man's clothing piled up in the corner. He quickly burst into the room where his beloved wife was on all fours, and James was behind her. Blinded with anger, Michael pounced on James. Sarah screamed in terror and didn't even try to break them up. Finally, Michael, heavily breathing, released the beaten man. And then it was his wife's turn. Michael screamed so loudly that it felt like the walls were shaking and the window frames rattled. Sarah cowered in the corner, covering her head with her hands and crying in anticipation of punishment. James ran away as soon as he had a chance, leaving the woman alone with her enraged husband. Michael grabbed her by the hand and dragged her to the exit, saying that she didn't yet know who she was messing with. He exposed Sarah completely naked in the hallway and slammed the door in her face. In shock, Sarah even stopped crying. All her thoughts were focused on one thing: what to do now, where to run. Unfortunately, she heard the elevator arrive on their floor and open. Her son Joseph and a neighbor from the apartment opposite stepped out. Sarah had never experienced such shame before and would never experience anything more humiliating. "Mom," Joseph exclaimed in surprise. The woman burst into tears again. Son quickly took off his jacket and put it on his mother's shoulders. Opening the door with his keys, the first thing he saw was his father throwing all of his mother's things into a large garbage bag. "Be glad your son saved you, or you would be standing there naked," he yelled at his wife and swore nastily. Joseph asked what was happening, and his father, not sparing any details, told his son what he had just seen and who his mother was now. Joseph looked at his mom with a sad expression and, saying he would come back later, left. Sarah was left alone with her husband once again. This time, Michael didn't throw himself at her or shout. He just silently cleared her things off the shelves and stuffed them into the bag. Throwing it out the door, he said, "Get out of here." Sarah left. She had savings for the first few days, so she rented a room in a cheap hotel. James kept calling her, begging her to come to him, but she blocked his number. She couldn't afford to live with a 20-year-old boy at the age of 45. Sarah had to get a job because now she had no one to help her. Even her son turned away from her. The job was tough, and Sarah was very tired from it. Later, she met a man who seemed very nice to her. However, it turned out that he was wanted by the police, and Sarah was dragged to offices for a long time, asking her the same questions to which she could not answer because he told her something completely different. This situation finally undermined her, and Sarah began to drown her sorrow in alcohol. Thus, from a good mother and a decent wife for a while, she descended to a woman whom one would not even dare to call kind. Her friends tried to save her, but they later turned away as well. Michael thought he could not survive his wife's betrayal, but his friends introduced him to a woman who gradually melted the ice in his heart. He was able to believe in love again, despite how his ex-wife treated him. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for listening to the story until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and be sure to like this video, as it will help us promote the channel. All the best.